Welcome back to the WatchTower podcast, the film review podcast for the TowerCast Network and Tower Productions. I'm your fellow host, Carlos de la Torre, giving you a directing, writing perspective for cinema. And I'm joined by my fellow co-host, Mr. Michael Lalao, a cinematography perspective.
Yeah, cinematography perspective. Lots to talk about this film.
Oh, yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah, I think so. I'm joined by my other fellow co-host, Mr. John Eric Castro, giving us an acting perspective.
You talking to me?
Oh. Are we there?
Nobody else here?
Dude, he's acting. I get it. Wow.
Last but not least, we are joined by Mr. Austin Young, making sure we're sounding great back there. Yay. Our fellow producer and editor. Thank you guys for joining us here at Aaron and George's Film Cafe for the live version of the WatchTower podcast. We're here to talk about my pick today, my first pick of the year. Yeah,
it's Martin Scorsese.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking about my cinematic heroes. 1976 masterpiece, Taxi Driver. Here to talk about Taxi Driver. We just screened it here at the Film Cafe, and man, it'd been a little while since I screened it. I think it's been maybe 2 or 3 years since I last saw it, and man, it still holds up very well for me.
The entire 2 and 3 years, you were trying to get us to watch this film because you were just like, "There's something so."
Well, I had seen it before that, eventually, but
the big reason I remember you were pushing this film. So much is because it was right after Joker came out, Joaquin, and I was like, this film's amazing. This film has so much to it. It's so unique. It's so different. And you were like, bullcrap. It's not like different. It's
not original.
Yeah, because you were saying it took a ton of inspiration from this film. And,
which wasn't just giving credit, but there's a lot to talk about there. Before we deep dive even into that point, I want the live studio audience to give themselves a round of applause for being here tonight. So thank you guys for joining us. We have a.
I want to ask though.
Yeah.
Was this you guys' first time, or you guys had seen it before?
First
time.
Seen it before. Kind of half an hour. A little more first timers for this film. Wow. Before I see a lot of new faces tonight, and we appreciate that. Thank you guys for coming down. I should state this. In case you're wondering, why am I listening to these three goofs talk about cinema and what validates them, and why should I care about their opinion?
Why should they?
You shouldn't.
Carlos.
But 2 reasons. Number one, first and foremost, we love cinema. That's just, point blank, straight to the point. We're students of cinema. We love cinema, and we study it very, very thoroughly because we love it. Secondly, we're filmmakers. We're filmmakers here in town, and we've been blessed enough to make our own motion pictures, whether it's short films, feature films, TV shows, stuff like that. Yeah, everything. And for that reason, we study cinema, right? We can't be good filmmakers or filmmakers, period, if we don't love cinema and study it. So in case you're wondering, why are we listening to these guys? That's why we have a podcast. We love talking about this stuff and thoroughly hearing people's opinions about cinema. I think at the end of the day, cinema is designed to do 2 things. To make you feel something, whatever that is, anytime you're watching a film. And if it didn't make you feel anything, it didn't succeed in its purpose. And number 2, my whole goal in cinema is to walk out of the theater and talk about whatever you just watched, whether it's with your significant other, my wife, who's very present tonight, lovely wife over there. Yeah, she knows this. She knows we walk out of a movie, we're just going to be talking about it for 2 hours while she's trying to just get home and go to sleep.
Poor Sandra.
Yeah, has to indulge in that. But or friends, significant other, friends, family, whatever. It's about talking about what you just saw, what you just experienced. So with all that being said, back to the point that Lau was making, Taxi Driver, and yeah, you're right. Joker came out. I was a little disappointed because after doing a lot of research, Joker naturally is a great film and got a lot of awards buzz and got a lot of recognition.
Best actor, Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah, and by the way, fantastic, but it touched on a lot of points in terms of mental health, but it was a little more on the nose than something like Taxi Driver. Taxi Driver was this psychoanalysis of a character, of a person, and Travis Bickle, our cabbie, antihero turned vigilante, certainly has we have a lot to explore in terms of this character just as human beings, and the themes of loneliness in this film, and loneliness could drive you to do one thing or the other to a certain degree if it gets that bad. So lots of points to talk about here, but yeah.
Start off with ratings.
Just to end on that point, Joker. Martin Scorsese was an executive producer of Joker. originally. I mean, he's still in-name producer, but
Really?
he was very heavily involved in the original development of Joker. So naturally, his influences,
makes sense. Yeah.
are in there. But why do you think Robert De Niro's in Joker?
Yeah.
That's all
I
Marty's doing.
thought it was the New York,
Yeah,
No,
you just thought it was because it was
well,
fun.
I mean, sure,
and De
right?
Niro had nothing else to
But
do,
Marty had a lot to do with that. So, but then he left for creative differences.
Yeah.
That's never been confirmed as to why, but my guess is he just wasn't given enough credit, and they don't really talk about it a ton. Like the influences of Taxi Driver, King of Comedy, a bunch of films that were Marty's are in Joker.
Do you think we had to do a little bit of where it's like the superheroes where he just doesn't like those type of
Yeah,
films?
no, definitely for sure. That world, I think he was trying to give that a shot.
Exactly, like he tried to put his feet in.
But I think ultimately the studio was obviously going to have a lot to say about what can and can't be said, and Joker didn't hold back.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
but, Marty's a producer, and when he produces, he has his hands in it as well. So
And he wants that.
I think he stepped back from that. He was also making The Irishman at the time, and naturally that film was his own undertaking. And but anyways, we always start this podcast off with ratings. And by the way, prepare yours because again tonight, if you participate in the kind of Q&A discussion we have at the end with the fellow audience, you come up, tell us your thoughts, give us your rating. So maybe start thinking about a rating if this was your first time seeing it, or if you've seen it and rewatched it and we're like, whoa, yeah, this is my rating. So yeah, this was my pick. So I'll go last, I think.
Yeah, but you get to pick who goes first. Who's on the rating?
I chose Austin last, so I'm gonna choose Costa this time.
Okay.
My
Rating.
rating for this one.
Because your thoughts right after we finished were concerning to me, but let's talk about it.
Really, like the ending?
Well, I mean, your words exactly were like, it was all right.
Oh no, I was just playing around. No. I think this is like the second time I seen it.
It had been a while though, right? You had
I saw it like when I was little, so I really didn't get it. So
Yeah,
this time
yeah,
I
yeah.
really got it. I'll give it, and you're gonna hate me for this.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Man.
I can't give it a 10. I'll give it a 9.9.
Oh my gosh,
Wait,
that's high,
that's-
man. Look at
yeah.
you.
I just think
This is a great acting piece, by the way. I mean,
This was
just
one of the
in
first
general.
films that taught me like, okay, films have a style to it, a vibe,
A texture.
Yeah, exactly. So it was the first time I got like introduced to like, okay, there's more to a film than just seeing people act. So yeah, I think that was like
the first time you saw it, when was it? How long ago was it? Were you like getting into acting at that point and maybe like exploring
I
that
think
world,
I
or?
think I was like 10. I think it's like the first thought of like, oh, can I
That's
try this
cool,
art out?
man.
Yeah,
that's,
for sure.
I mean,
So I'll give it a
Interesting.
9.9.
Oh man,
9.9.
that's high. You made it sound like
you
you're
set
gonna be
the
like,
bar, pal.
No, dude.
Wow. Okay.
Mr. Dalal.
Without too much thought and going
Initial
into-
rating.
Initial rating. I want to say a 9.5. It's
9.5.
a really solid picture. I had a bunch of notes that I want to talk about as far as the visuals at the beginning of the film and how that kind of transforms later on. But yeah,
Michael
kinda-
Chapman, man, he was DP on this. He worked on 2 films with Scorsese, and then they really stopped after that. And I'll get into that as to why and how Marty started developing his sense of style with other DPs. And but anyways, I agree.
It's super. It's just such a beautiful film all the way around. I love the way that they capture the nighttime sequences and the daytime.
Sure.
But also, like you said, if it makes you feel something, if you really connect with it. I mean, there was sometimes the hard part about like coming up with ratings and analyzing everything is that you're trying to dissect the little pieces to say like what's good about it, but when you're just so captured in, you almost forget about it being something to be analyzed. It's just a piece of art, and it was really, really solid on a lot of fronts. So yeah, 9.5.
9.5.
Yeah.
Fair. Mr. Austin Young.
Man in the back.
Yeah, man in the back. Who has a camera on him tonight, I think.
He does.
He does have a camera on
He
him.
does.
So do we not get a fact on it all?
A fun
No
fact
fact.
about Austin is he's wearing a hat inspired by Whataburger. That's fun.
That's actually true.
It is true. It's a fun fact.
Rating, sir.
9.
Man,
Elaborate. Why?
going down by the second.
Fair. 9. Why?
I don't know. It's just like there was something missing. I can't tell what it is, but there was something
Do you
missing.
think it's because it was a 1976
Well,
kind of vibe?
That's totally fine. It's 9 out of 10, right? Our rating system goes up 10, so that's totally fine. Something's missing for it not to be a 10, but out of mine, it seems like more positives than negatives are in there. So why that high? We never rate films this high, by the way. If you pay attention to our podcast, we're not very forgiving, at least for initial
Exactly.
ratings. A lot of times, I'm biased, obviously, for this film, but
No, just like the art that Travis Bickle has within the film and those things.
I think it just hits so
I
many
agree.
I
marks
agree.
so well. But
Yeah.
it's kind of like if you were to give it that 10 rating, it does have that X factor. You know,
Yeah,
what is it missing?
Yeah, I mean, no, I agree. I think I you know.
But without getting too much into it.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Well,
Your
you
pick.
had a question or you had a point?
No, he just likes touching his beard.
No, it's just. I want to hear your rating first.
Okay. You know, I'm actually. But if you know me well enough, you know Marty's my favorite director and cinematic hero, and I really am a student of his.
Oh yeah, you won't shut up about it.
I won't shut up about the man, the 80-year-old man. No, but if you know me well and if you heard previous episodes of our podcast, my favorite film of his is actually Hugo, which to me is just this more endearing, touching piece. Definitely no violence in it, at least not to this extent, and not as heavy in every sense of the word.
You told me it was Mean Streets, dude.
I
And
love
then you
Mean
changed
Streets.
it to
I
Goodfellas.
love Mean Streets.
That's just 'cause we were
I
in the
think
room.
Taxi
to the
Driver.
Irishman.
I know,
It's
right?
like,
I know.
what?
No, Taxi Driver wouldn't exist without Mean Streets. By the way, we'll get into that because Harvey Keitel does really well in this film too.
Just Feed the Flame.
But yeah, Feed the Flame. I'd give it about a 9.6.
Okay.
So I scored it higher?
I think so.
Yeah.
What did
Yeah.
you like about it?
I mean, that's a tough question to ask with just a 9.6 rating, right? But I think, in my personal opinion, Scorsese had done about 3 films before this, prior to this. Those 3 films, if you really look at them, he hadn't truly found his voice. And I think Taxi Driver, he was starting to find
For
his
sure,
voice.
okay.
Because the next picture after this is Raging Bull. And
wow.
Raging Bull is a masterpiece. I mean, it's terrific on every level. And by the way, Raging Bull changed a lot about how Marty shoots films, about how he explores films. He started working with Thelma Schoonmaker on Raging Bull, who has been his lifelong collaborator to this day. She's been his editor since then. And so I think this was right before he learned who he was as a filmmaker. And once he learned, it was like, all right, here I am.
Yeah.
So I think that's, if there's anything missing, if there's a factor that just didn't put it at a 10 for me, it's that. It's that as exciting as it is for a filmmaker to watch another filmmaker find their voice very successfully, it's also like, oh man, like he made some choices that Scorsese, to me, in his early days especially, even to this day, I mean, because now he doesn't care, he doesn't have to ask permission for anything, right? But in his early days especially, he was one of the, pardon my French, one of the ballsiest filmmakers to try anything and everything, and was unapologetic about it. He wasn't making films for the studio. There's so many great stories about the making of this film and how he went against the studio system to get it made, and to get it finished, and even just attaching his name on it. So for that reason, I think that's just kind of the missing factor. Like, but it's a good thing. It's a good thing that it's not this perfect film. It was him finding his voice as an artist, and I can appreciate that a lot. So.
Yeah.
9.6.
I feel like, and we've talked about this with like Wes Anderson,
Mm-hmm.
that when you look at their early works, especially somebody who's like so stylized,
Right.
You start to see these progression moments that then you start seeing in every film. And there's
see
a
glimpses
lot
of
those,
them, right?
Yeah, you see glimpses where I was, I like one of them is I love his incorporation of the voiceover, where in other films it doesn't really feel as motivated all the time.
This was one of the first, probably the second time. The first time I remember him using voiceover was Mean Streets, and that's the film that made people pay attention to him, like on a realistic level. But voiceover, if you've seen anything, The Irishman, Goodfellas, voiceover is a very prevalent thing for Marty. I love that a lot about him, and I think if Taxi Driver is one of the most effective films in terms of voiceover, for sure.
And it's the fact that it's a storytelling element, him kind of writing down these thoughts, as opposed to it just being like a thought process. Like, I mean, you look at things like Wolf of Wall Street, and it's very much it's a thought process that this guy's speaking out and
very
preaching.
confidently, right?
Yeah, but this one, it's more like.
It's like
there's nobody to listen, and I love how it's always this very written
it's a really
thing.
good point.
Yeah,
I also like that, like, we see glimpses of Travis writing notes, right? Whether it's to Iris or just writing things. And when I listen to this voiceover, I picture his his crappy handwriting on the crappy paper, right? You know what I mean? Because he also on the to the naked ear, right? You're like, oh, he messed up that line. Why did they re-record that? Like, he repeats lines, or he's finding that way of, like, you know what I mean? So I thought that was very interesting.
He's trying to find that kind of momentum in like his thought process.
This film was, I mean, substantially ahead of its time. 1976, they made this picture. If in any reference of cinema, you think, where was it at, right? To me, I always preach like 1969 and how that changed the course of history for cinema, with things like Easy Rider and just things that were revolutionizing cinema. The reason I'd say 76 is important for this, for context, is because 77 is when Star Wars comes out and changes the game in terms of blockbusters. And
shoot, yeah.
I mean, Jaws had done it a little bit before that,
Star Wars was a game changer. Yeah.
but Star Wars blew up the world and stuff like that. So for something like Taxi Driver to come out right before cinema changed again, I think it's pretty important.
Also, fun fact, Rocky came out this year.
76.
76.
Oh, okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think...
Didn't it win Best Picture that year?
Yeah.
Okay, because
Rocky
this was
came
up for
out
Best Picture.
at the end of the year, I think sometime around December, and this came out around February. So this was start of the year, very interesting.
Did Stallone win Best Actor film?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's actually a joke.
He won a hit to the face. I don't know what else he won after that.
Well, no, I'm sure he was nominated, right?
For sure. I mean, yeah, I guess so. But for this one, was Robert De Niro?
Yeah, he was nominated. What was okay, so it's a weird timeline in terms of Robert De Niro's career with this, because 76 was when the film was released. They shot this in the summer of 75. Robert De Niro, upon about a couple weeks before the film was released, Taxi Driver, had just won an Oscar for Godfather 2.
Oh, wow.
Before his Oscar, most people, he wasn't a household name. He was the guy from Mean Streets.
Right.
You know, he was the guy who did a couple of Brian De Palma pictures, which is why, by the way, Brian De Palma, I'll get into why he's so important for the making of this film, but that's who De Niro was. Nobody really knew him. And then what's awesome is right before they were making this film, all the Oscar buzz for The Godfather 2 was coming out. And when he won the Oscar, he could have asked for the difference in his check, quote unquote, right? He could have asked for more money.
Right.
And De Niro was like, no, a lot of people took a pay cut to make this picture. Most of the cast made $35,000 a piece, which for these actors, Keitel was a big name. De Niro had just won an Oscar. All these people. Jodie Foster had come out in a film with Marty called Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore as a younger kid and stuff like that. So they were all kind of big names, except De Niro until he hit big. And he could have asked for the difference in his money. Like, producers were like, oh man, the studio's going to shut us down. We're over budget. We're over time. If De Niro asks for more money, that's it. They're going to cancel this film. And De Niro's like, no, I'll honor my word. I'll keep to my 35. I'm not going to ask for more money. And then naturally, him winning the Oscar boosted this film into people seeing it. This film was nominated for Best Picture, and it also went to Cannes. What's very important about Taxi Driver in Cannes is that it won the highest prize you could win in Cannes Film Festival, which was the Palme d'Or, or is the Palme d'Or. That's the highest honor you can get in any film, in the biggest film festival known to man, which is Cannes, right? So that's a big deal. That catapults Scorsese as a director. He gets to make better, bigger, better pictures. De Niro's an actor. The next picture they make together is Raging Bull. All of that happened because of this.
Wow.
So just to deliver some context of Taxi Driver, but let's get into the arc. Let's get into the story. We always kick this off with story.
I was kind of like...
How do we feel about it?
The pacing was kind of like messing with me, but I loved it.
How so?
Yeah.
It's important. That's important.
I don't know, because I was thinking it's a 76 film, so the pacing's kind of slow for back then. But
Sure.
It just starts picking up, once that girl rejects him. It just...
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I see the pacing, why it started off like that, but then it just starts picking up.
Yeah.
And you get that feel of New York, that vibe that, I just...
Yeah. It's important to note that Taxi Driver, in its most foundational level, is about loneliness. It's the exploration of loneliness. Travis Bickle is a Vietnam veteran who just came back, from the war. Honorably discharged. We don't know. He might have been a war hero too, by the way. We don't know. Honorably discharged from the war, from the Marines, and he comes and just wants to forget what he saw. He suffers from PTSD. He suffers from insomnia because of it. He wants to work long hours. Driving a taxi makes sense, right? But he's exploring his loneliness in the most human way possible. He's hoping to make a connection with something, with people, hopefully. But it's not, my wife was asking me something. She was like, and her thing was the same position. That's why I asked why you feel like that, because, Sandra's saying, hey, I'm supposed to feel like weird right now, right? Like, this feels uncomfortable, right? I'm supposed to feel that. I was like, yeah, for sure. Definitely, because he feels uncomfortable. He's just come back to a country that he doesn't believe in anymore after the war to a certain degree. He doesn't want anything to do with politics until he meets this girl just to impress her. And when he's trying to make human connection, they let him down time and time again. And he's just looking for something to grab onto. So I think the whole feeling of the first act of setting up the world and setting up this dirty, grimy New York, By the way, he's no saint. You know, this man's a racist by all intents and purposes. This film dissects a lot of the racism in New York City in the 70s, and the Vietnam War is a big kind of cause of that, you know, in terms of who they were sending out to war and why, and the politics. I won't get into that, but Travis saw people a certain way. The first draft, this was written by Paul Schrader, by the way. Paul Schrader, fantastic writer and director. The guy's been nominated for Oscars for directing as well. I mean, the guy's really, really great. But he wrote, this was his first thing that blew him up. And when Paul Schrader wrote the first draft, it was very, 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 you'd think this was racist.
It was a lot more.
I mean, to the point where Travis was written as this character that would target black people. Stuff like that. Just stuff like that. That was just like, Marty read the script and was like, well, no, it doesn't fit. It has no direction. Yeah. Harvey Keitel's character, the pimp, was a black man. Decided to change that for two reasons. For the reason that it just wasn't working, and Keitel wanted the role. Well, Marty had offered him another role. He offered him the role of the campaign manager.
Oh no!
And yeah, he was like, I don't want that, man. Let me play the pimp.
Great as the pimp, dude. He was so good that you want to go into the screen and just kind of like choke him out.
But anyways, just to talk a little bit about that kind of aspect of things. Yeah. But I do want to talk about the writing as in connections to the story, because Paul Schrader had just moved to Los Angeles and was living in his car and was experiencing this new level of loneliness. It's a new city, doesn't really know anybody, isn't connecting with anybody. Is squatting in his ex-girlfriend's apartment while she's out of town for a couple of weeks. Like, he's just in this thing, and then he writes Taxi Driver as like a fever dream, just like, I had to get this out. It took him about a week to write the first draft of the script. Wow. And then he becomes friends with Brian De Palma. If you don't know who Brian De Palma is, he's most famously known for directing films like Scarface, Carrie. But he's a part of what we call the film school brats, which is the Spielbergs, the Scorseses, the Coppolas, George Lucas. He was in that world with them, and a lot of people really respect him and admire him. Like, a lot of people don't love Scarface, a lot of people don't love a ton of his films and his approach to cinema, but you listen to Brian De Palma's opinion. Mm-hmm. Scorsese went to LA to see what was his next move, and this is where we met Roger Corman. Roger Corman was a huge, if you don't know who Roger Corman is, B cinema, C cinema, horror stuff, primarily when he directs, but he produced Spielberg's first film. He produced Marty's first film, Coppola's first film. Like, he jumpstarted these guys' career. But the films that they were making were terrible. But it connected all these people, is what I'm saying. And when he met Brian De Palma, Brian and Marty were friends. Marty, Brian's like, hey, I need you to meet Paul Schrader. He's a terrific writer. He wrote the script. He had just sold a script to Warner Brothers called Yakuza, and made a lot of money for it, Paul Schrader. But when Taxi Driver came about, De Palma was attached to direct, and then he decided not to anymore. He had another project he wanted to pursue. And he said, what about Marty? Marty's from New York. The script was written for Los Angeles. Originally, it took place in Los Angeles.
As a taxi driver?
Yeah, and Marty's like, what are you doing? Like, taxi drivers are very prominent in New York. Exactly. Let's change it to that. And then they changed the script, and lo and behold, it took them about 2-3 years of development to make this film. They started in 1974, made the picture in 73, and then made the picture in 75. But
was Robert always attached to this one?
To a certain degree, not really. I mean, it's pretty interesting. In the course of these 3-4 years when they were developing, read the list on either IMDb or wherever you can find these lists. Everybody and their mother were up for the role in terms of every character.
What?
When they were pursuing the Travis Bickle role, the people who were big, Dustin Hoffman was at the peak of his career at that point. He was up for the role. Jeff Bridges was up for this role. I mean, a bunch of big names. It would surprise you.
I mean, that would have been interesting.
It would have surprised you. De Niro and Marty were both kind of busy after they kind of came back and were like, we really want to make this film. They got the money for it. De Niro was attached, and then they started searching for the other roles. When they cast the role of
Jodie Foster,
a bunch of names. Carrie Fisher was up for this role. Kim Cattrall, Sex and the City, she was up for this role. I mean, a bunch of people were auditioned. They wanted this role. And Marty had done Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore with Jodie Foster.
Right.
She just played kind of just the daughter in a very, very interesting picture as well. It's more about a relationship of the mom and the son as opposed to Jodie Foster's character. But she did well. Marty told the mom, hey, She's gonna play a 12-year-old prostitute. You wanna bring her in for this?" Her mom was like,
Absolutely.
"I don't think she's right for it, but I'll send her in."
There was a bunch of uncomfortable scenes,
Yeah,
man.
absolutely. 12 and a half years old, right?
Even in 2022, right?
But she was attached, and she spent a good amount of time with a young prostitute. There's this. No, I'm serious. This character was based on a young. I don't know if she was 12. She was probably 14.
14, yeah. That's what.
14-year-old prostitute that Paul Schrader met in New York. I mean,
There's
like,
no way. This
no.
is just to promote the film. There's no way.
Maybe, I don't know. But Paul Schrader meets this prostitute, like he's in a cafe, and then you know when it's a working girl, and then he says,
I don't know.
No, well,
I don't know.
movies make you know when it's a
Okay,
working
yeah.
girl, Castro.
Okay.
Yeah, you go to Alameda. You know what you're looking
Hell
at,
no,
Castro.
bro.
Oh, God.
No, but
I just yell something and just drive.
but you know who they are. Thank you for proving my point. No, but he saw this young girl, and he's like, man, what is this? So he tells her, he goes up, and he admits, he's like, this is creepy. I just wrote a role
No,
about
but yeah,
this.
I
I
mean,
need
dang.
to, so he tells her, hey, I want to talk to you. It's nothing social, nothing like that. Just wrote a film. I want to
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
get perspective,
yeah.
And they met.
She was like, how much?
And by the way, this is going to sound very, very creepy, and especially for today's climate. But he says, hey, you can stay in my hotel. You go, I'll leave you the room type of thing. I want you to meet the director. I want you to meet Marty. They were staying at the same hotel at the time. He slips a note under Marty's room and says, I met Iris. I met Iris. We're having breakfast tomorrow at 9 a.m. Come and meet her.
Oh, okay.
Because he met this prostitute who had these characteristics that, like, this is her. This is who we like. And this girl comes out in the film.
Who was she? Was she one
So-
of the...
Was she the friend?
She was the friend. She was the
Oh,
friend. So the one
oh,
that
the one- okay.
is like
That's
dragging her out of
crazy.
the car, or like dragging her out of in front of the car.
Yeah.
And comes out a couple times. She's wearing the sunglasses.
Yeah.
It's a spitting image of her. So
That's-
Jodie Foster got to sit with
Little
this prostitute and get perspective. And there was a lot of characteristics that she drew from that. For instance, when she's making her sandwich and puts the jelly and then puts sugar on it.
Yeah.
A lot of people think, oh, that's to, a lot of critics were like, that's to show that Jodie Foster's character, that's to show that Iris is a kid at heart. And she's just going to put sugar on, and then
That's kind of what I
that's
thought.
kind of interesting, right? But Jodie Foster came out and defended herself. She's like, no, I learned it from this prostitute. What happened was she was a drug addict. She was a heroin addict. And she was kicking this stuff. So in order to do that, you have to replace it with something that gives you that same feel. So what a lot of drug addicts would do was add sugar to whatever they're eating just to feel that kind of energy again.
Wow.
So that's why she put, a lot of drug addicts, it was a very common thing drug addicts would do. Is put sugar on their
Just to
already
get
sweet thing.
type of a-
Just to get a kick, a high, just something that they could
Interesting.
remotely taste. So a lot of great characteristics went into that. Though they stuck to the script in terms of structure, a lot of this film was improvised. A lot of moments with Jodie, a lot of moments with Sybil Shepherd.
Robert De Niro. Didn't he improvise that line?
The
Talking
famous
to me?
"You talking to me" line is improvised.
That's acting.
Great. That's acting. The line.
Wow.
It's a great story, by
Thanks
the
for
way.
pointing it out.
The story goes, they were 5 days over production. They were over budget. The AD's knocking at the door of the room. Get out! We got to go to the next shot. Jason's looking at me like, yeah, that's what we do. Knocking at the door of the room.
PTSD right there.
And Marty's like, give me 1 more minute. I need 1 more minute. And they they got the gun contraptions and all this stuff. And there's a famous song from the 50s that has this kind of moment of you talking to me thing. And then they just started saying that. It came to his mind. And Marty's like directing him from under the camera. Keep going, keep this going. And that's where we get this amazing scene,
you
right?
make
One of the most
magic.
quotable lines of cinematic history, literally. It's just him talking to, again, so a critic pointed this out, which I thought was fascinating. The reason why that moment's very important was he's looking in the mirror, trying to make some type of human interaction, even if it's with himself.
Damn.
That's how lonely this guy is, and at the same time rehearsing for what he thinks is going to be his moment of glory, right, when he kills this politician.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyways, just a lot of moments that made this story very
Authentic.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Even the setting, by the way, I was telling, I think, Austin earlier that New York feels dirtier. Like, it sets up the precedent for New York stories, right? There was a garbage strike when they shot the film. which
so
means there's piles of garbage everywhere. And Marty would say, I'd point a camera anywhere in any direction, and there was garbage. So it was perfect for this monologue of filth and let the rain clean the filth and stuff like that. So just, again, authenticating moments for
That is beautiful.
a really cool New York story. Right?
Yeah.
But,
No, I kind of want to go back to the beginning when we're talking about how when
made you feel
written.
that.
No, well, I was gonna say when it was written, you're saying how the character had a much more kind of like, I guess, racist kind of role to him.
Sure.
I think whenever you're dealing with like an anti-hero story, look at any one that you've seen, you know, you're trying to create a character that people can connect with for at least an hour and a half, without something that people are just like, why am I watching this guy? He's just a terrible human being.
You guys hate
like,
him? Like in the first act?
No,
like,
no,
did
no,
you, were you
no.
guys, no, I'm very curious. Like,
no,
you guys were not,
I didn't
not,
hate him because I think there's an honest part to him, and that honest part makes you kind of sympathize with him.
Sure,
like, especially at the beginning when he's telling you, yeah, I don't have much education, and he's trying to joke around and, you know, just kind of be playful while telling people about himself, and they're like, stop doing that. Like, do you want a job or not? And it's those little moments that I guess humanize him enough where then for the rest of the film, even if you see he's going down this kind of darker path, you still kind of care about him.
Yeah,
especially, I mean, the Jodie Foster parts. The Jodie Foster parts, I mean, really kind of show the humanity in this character and really bring him out. And,
she really was like his saving grace, right? Like
Yeah,
inadvertently, because he was channeling he was going to be the next Mark David Chapman. You know, he was just wanting to kill people to get this attention almost, right? And to him, he was standing up for the right thing, right? But ultimately, he was going to get some type of connection out of this, right? That's what he was seeking out. And then ended up channeling his energy of like, I'm gonna kill this guy because the girl that rejected me works for him.
Yeah.
And, I mean, almost a petty reason, right?
Exactly.
Into, this little girl's in hell. I need to get her out of it. I need to, you know. So that's a very fascinating arc.
Yeah.
Very fascinating.
I just feel like whenever you're dealing with a story with such dark undertones, it really is that question, I think, for like writers and directors. How do you make a character that still keeps the truth of the story, which, like, again, you're going into that loneliness, but doesn't make you want to completely reject them, you know? And
I think it'd be easy, right, to the common eye, just like, I don't care. I don't care enough for this guy to root for him until Iris comes up.
I kind of saw like what you're talking about when he's like telling them that, you know, I don't have any education or anything. You thought that was playful. I kind of started seeing the creepiness that I saw at the end when he's just kind of that weird.
Well, there's something kind of odd about him.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's where it goes back to, like, he was a war veteran with PTSD. He doesn't really know how to socialize in this new kind of environment.
And that's also subtle, right? By the way, that's what I love about this picture, too, is there's no exposition. There's no unnecessary exposition. There's no, I suffer from PTSD. I need to go to a doctor. I go to a doctor. There's nothing like that.
Well, he's taking some type of medicine.
Well, yeah, sure. For probably obtaining it illegally, considering the nature of how he's getting things, right? Or a VA type of situation or something. But that's my point. We get to fill in those gaps.
Exactly.
It's not exposition-y. It's not like spoon-feeding you the information. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
I want to ask you guys, how do you guys feel about the Betsy? I think that's your character's name? Sybil Shepherd's character, the blonde, the love interest, if you will. How did you guys feel about her?
I felt
she's
like,
beautiful. Oh, sorry. Sorry. No.
No, I felt like she represented an ideal that he would have wanted to have in his life and maybe even had in himself.
Right.
But like, society wasn't going to kind of let that happen. And I mean, it's weird to say that society, but I really feel like where he would talk to people and try to like create that connection, or even just be with her and think like, I could date this person, I could talk to them and get along with them just fine. There's
she's
such a strong barrier.
She's one of the first people that's willing to go there with him, right? Like,
But then we see a side where he takes her to this weird ass film.
No, but I
but
mean,
I think that's a like anti.
I understood her point. You guys didn't understand.
No,
her point.
absolutely, absolutely.
I felt sorry for De Niro's character because there was this genuine kind of like,
For sure,
I
he
just
didn't
thought
know.
it was
I don't
a
know about.
movie. Like,
yeah.
like
I didn't believe that part.
Really?
No, I didn't. I didn't believe that he didn't know what he was doing. You know.
But there's so many times
But
that
it's
he
like an
comes
innocence.
out-
It is like an innocence of like, I'm kind of showing. It's like a kid who brings like an ugly toy home from school and shows it to his parents. Like, his parents are gonna know, like, yo, that's an ugly toy. You shouldn't be playing with this. But the kid's like, I care about it. I want to show you it. And I think that's what it was.
That's what, yeah.
The more than like him being like, I didn't know that you wouldn't like this. It's
there's
like,
so many times when he
hey,
talks to
I
people.
like this. Can I show
Yeah.
you something I like? It's like this weird innocence. So though Sybil Shepherd, though Betsy's right, naturally, we still empathize. I still empathize with him. Like, oh man, poor dude. He didn't know how to do. He didn't know how to.
He didn't know how to date. You know.
Yeah, he didn't. He can't even get that far to that point. You know. And by the way, that moment I think is very important because not only does it set him off into like the negative side of things, but it also shows us that like we see multiple attempts of him trying to connect with a human being, multiple attempts, whether it's the other cab drivers.
But I'm just saying, like, you could see it kind of like creep out with her leaving, and then like, hey, where you going?
Yeah,
There
I've seen those moments.
There is two sides to the coin, and that's again goes back to the complication of like he's an anti-hero.
Right.
You want to empathize with his character because you see he's trying to make connection, but you also feel for her because you're like, oh man, I wouldn't have let, if I was in that position, I wouldn't have let the date go that far where I'm at a sketchy like area and like watching these.
But why did I mean? Did she trust him enough to be like, oh, it's not a dirty movie, okay? Let's just,
I think it just kind of.
Did she feel sorry for him?
No. At the very beginning,
I think there was like something sinister, or not like how girls are.
Like it was a little bit exciting for her.
Exactly.
Like,
just
really?
Yeah.
I didn't get that.
What did you get?
I got that she was saying that there was.
Towards the end.
Jeez, no, I saw that there was a genuine honesty in him, in the way he described himself.
But not on her.
In the way that people would ask him, like, oh, do you follow politics? And he's like, no, I really don't. I don't know too much about that, or I don't know too much about this. But it's genuine want for connection, and it's an honest version of himself. You're not getting any face with this guy.
Yeah. I agree about that, though. I think she represents the possibility of something he can connect to, but on a bigger scale because she responds. She responds. She goes on a date with him. She wants to talk to him. She wants to get to know him.
But you don't think it's out of pity or kind of like something like...
I think so. That. No, I think it was out of like...
Because then there's even that little flirt where she's like, well, I get off at this time, so if you're here, then you're here. Yeah. Like there's a little flirt with it as opposed to like, okay.
Not just that, but the other dude, the campaign manager, was trying to get in there.
Exactly.
She didn't care for him.
You just couldn't match with his mouth. That was the only problem, really.
But she didn't care for him.
Was that a callback to when he got shot with his fingers?
There was a lot of moments that kind of were like hinting towards that because there's that, and then later on when he's at the shooting range and you see that he aims for the hand. So there was
I missed that.
There was so much imagery that's led up to like the final scene, and I think that's why it punches so hard. But yeah.
Yeah, no, the reason I ask about her character is because she ends up becoming this catalyst. She's the reason for his like downfall, but she's the reason for his hope too at the same time. And by the way, it's not her specifically. Sure, no,
it's her.
It is her.
They paint her to be obviously this angel that he meets and he falls in love with to a certain degree, right? But as I was telling you about that shot at the end, that rear view mirror shot, I thought that was a fantastic shot. But he ultimately got to a point where like, yeah, you represent this thing I wanted, but I think I'm a little more fulfilled now. I don't need you.
By the way,
that was beautiful.
Talk about intentional cinematography.
Oh.
I love that in their earlier conversations,
right,
they'll put them both either face to face or they're talking with each other. But that last shot, the only time we see her talking is through the mirror. And you thought it was such a beautiful shot, but more than that,
rear
I felt like
view, she's in the past. Yeah.
She's in the past.
Fantastic.
Very much like I'm only connecting with you now as a taxi driver and nothing more. I loved those little moments.
What did you say when she gets out of the car and then he just peels out?
What did she say?
Yeah, what did she say? Did she say something?
Oopsie doopsie. What did she say?
I don't remember. Was it memorable? Was it meant to be memorable?
I don't know.
See, we're already forgetting about her. This film worked.
Well, he peeled out, so it was something like about the president. Or something.
Oh no. She asked how much was it, like the fare.
Oh, see, that's even better.
Like, puts it in drive.
Yeah, that's
so long.
beautiful.
But that's also very much like I don't need you.
Exactly.
Like, and then
I don't even need your money type of thing. Yeah.
It looks like you need it.
Let's go into cinematography because you went there. You went there. Michael Chapman did this.
Another great Michael in cinematography. There's like six.
Scorsese.
One of them's great.
Thanks, Austin.
No, there's another. Michael Ballhaus. That's all. That's his other.
So there's
Scorsese.
at least
yeah,
two good Michaels.
Anyways, I think the cinematography was absolutely very, very intentional, as we say, makes good cinema. But it's also very, I think, forthcoming. I mean, I think these were Marty's choices.
Yeah.
These were Marty's choices as a director.
Top-down view.
Right.
You were mentioning the push-in later on.
The push-in in the hallway.
Yeah, a lot of those super iconic kind of things that we see in a lot of Marty's films. But
What was up with the last part where they're like going through the whole
Oh
outside?
man, let me tell you. But well, tell them your perspective of cinematography. But there's a reason.
Sorry.
There's a reason
Get to
for
that.
it.
Yeah.
I feel
Overhead
like,
craning out.
Yeah, that overhead craning out shot.
I was just trying to place why.
I don't know.
It felt weird to you?
Yeah.
What felt weird to you?
It's a
The whole going through the like, okay, show the bodies or
everything
whatever, but
else-
then outside.
No,
and
but
then-
everything else was very like intimate, and it's his story, it's his eyes, everything he's going through. Once it goes into that top-down view shot, it's the image that's left at the end, the big image of him, that fight scene, all that he's been through, everything that everybody.
Even in the street.
There's another characteristic which is absolutely true. The bigger characteristic that I think is going to prove what you're asking is, did you see the amount of people that were paying attention to this?
Yeah, with the cop cars and then towards the back, yeah.
There was a big like mob of people trying to see what happened. The attention he wasn't getting. That attention he was seeking. He was craving this like he was. People wanted to connect to him. He wanted people to connect. And now they'll forever know his story. You know. The newspapers.
See, it would have been dope if it would have been a cool ending if it would have stopped there and he would have died. But he still lived, so it's kind of like he still got the attention, I guess.
Why would it have been a cool ending? He wouldn't have experienced what he was craving for so long.
But that's kind of like the legend, right? Like, you know, you go out on top, people talking about you.
I think if he.
I don't think he would have gone.
Yeah.
Want to go out that way. Right? By the way, he was preparing to die. To be fair.
Yeah, even the whole.
Well, I mean,
I was
the
like,
earlier shots where he's trying to shoot himself and then tries the next gun. And all
Oh,
that.
those were heavy, by the way.
Yeah.
I was watching this thing just to talk about that cinematography a little bit in that moment, that choice. I was watching this thing on Netflix called Voir, Voir, and it's just these essays of directors and people who study cinema just talking about visual essays of like moments in cinema. And one director talks about there's this whole episode about the revenge story. And he talks about Scorsese's decision in Goodfellas, the single shot of Michael walking from after he finds out that the guy across the street had like inappropriately touched his girl and she was crying. He walks across the street. The guy's like fixing his car, and then he's like, "Well, what do you want?" Gets the butt of his gun and just beats the living hell out of him, right? But it's uninterrupted. It's a oneer. And you have to simmer in that moment, like he's just beating the hell out of him. They mentioned that when they show the film on TV, they cut out a substantial amount of frames where you just see him hit him once, and that was it. Like as a moment of like that kind of humanizes him. Like, all right, yeah, but when you see this mobster dude like beat him, it makes it real. Exactly. The reason why I bring that up is because that moment of him trying to shoot himself was uninterrupted. We're waiting for the bullet. We're waiting for the but it makes us feel like man, like skip to the next cut. Like that,
you have to sit with that very real like punch.
Simmering.
This guy is just dead set on.
Do you think that's what your wife was trying to like? This is why.
Well, that was more in the beginning when she was asking that, but that's certainly a feeling that I'm sure everybody was feeling like, oh man, like just dude, like I don't want to see you do this, but I have to sit here and see it. I already saw everything else, you know. By the way, that shot that you were mentioning about. Just an interesting factoid is like when Citizen Kane came about, they dug a hole. Yeah, Austin. They dug a hole in the ground to get a lower camera angle because that's what Orson Welles wanted. They dug a hole into the ground to get this camera. They did the opposite here. They cut out the roof of the building. They cut out all the ceiling so that they could create this shot.
Oh man,
you know. And by the way,
I like that now.
Yeah.
Something I want to talk about the art style. I thought it was very inspired from, but you seem kind of off put by it. Was at the beginning I felt it was very cinema verite.
Not off put. Verite is more of a just by definition, right? I don't love cinema verite. I don't. I just to me I might as well be watching a documentary.
No, but that's
you know.
So just in case we all need that refresher.
Yeah. What is cinema verite?
Castro? What?
No, actually, I want to.
Okay, fine. No. Cinema verite is the French kind of movement of capturing story through life as opposed to mimicking life to get a story.
That and you're essentially a fly on the wall.
I like that one better.
Oh. Sorry, jeez. No, but
there's a fly on the wall. You're a fly on the wall in these moments.
Yeah.
So that's why I say like you're right. Stylistically, we're like the realism has to be recreated to get something out of it. But
or finding the reason I say finding story through life is because at the very beginning there's these super intimate close-up shots of just like looking through the window as the lights pass by, seeing those real strips of New York, the people that walk around, the people he's faced with, him being just confined to his taxi cab. And what I love about that, it authenticated everything as far as like the struggle that he's going to go through in the next sequences, because after those very close-up intimate moments of just feeling the texture of New York, then they go back to like the wides and the medium shots to try to establish the story and the environment, but you've already feel like you've been in this environment
it's
for a
one
while,
of the most fascinating. That's what I think what I was talking to Sandra about, because when she was feeling this was mostly, or at least when she expressed it to me, was in the first act, because this is a very interesting way to set up a world.
Yeah.
You know, like it's real. It's not Blade Runner setting up the futuristic timeline of whatever. It's real. Yeah. You're seeing this through the eyes of Travis Bickle, and it's real. It's realer than anything you've seen up until this point. So
it's not these big wide shots of New York and him walking to his car. It's very much whatever he sees, he's seeing, you feeling all of that.
Let me tell you, when I think Scorsese found his voice in this film, let me tell you the exact moment where I think that happened. You want to know what Scorsese thinks the most important shot of the film is?
When he comes out.
I feel like
when he comes out, when?
Scorsese.
What do you mean?
When he comes out, that was the most important.
That was his cameo?
Wow.
Oh, that was great, wasn't it? Anybody? That was a great moment. That's Eric's moment. This is one of Eric Sanchez's favorite films, and he's directed.
He's actually not that bad of an actor, though. When he was back
he was pretty great in it. Right? By the way,
basis.
the reason he put himself in the film was because the actor couldn't show up that day.
No,
I'm dead serious.
And he was
wow.
so iconic for that moment. I mean,
it's great, right? And he comes out 2 times. He comes out there,
and then
what's the important moment? What's the thing that
he's like Hitchcock cameo? When he calls Betsy on the phone after the theater thing, and he's like on the payphone.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And we're there, and we're sitting with him on this phone call, and it's like so awkward and uncomfortable. And then eventually the camera just starts tracking to the hallway, and we stay on the hallway. The reason Marty says that this is the most important shot of the film for him was because this represents the isolation. It's like he says the reason we did that was because it's almost like this conversation is too uncomfortable to bear. It's so awkward that I don't even want to see it anymore.
And you're not even willing to stay there for the end of it.
No.
You're just kind of...
So we get to the hallway, and it represents his loneliness. Like, this is it. We can't even see him on the phone with somebody. This is the end of that human interaction for however long. Mm-hmm. And I can't stand to see this guy do this to himself. Like, it's he's lonely, and this is what loneliness does.
Even going back to
the empty hallway, ultimately, so... this to me that represents the whole picture, right? We're seeing vignettes of Travis doing this throughout the whole film.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's
crazy. Uncomfortability of like, oh, man, like, dude, what are you doing? Like,
going back to like loneliness, it's really seen throughout the entire film. Where instead of putting him in these grouped up shots, where he could be in like a 3-shot with the people in the back of the cab and then himself, and really connecting the two. Yeah. You're always seeing him alone. And,
he's trying to be personable too, right? He's trying so hard to connect. And by the
way,
even
with this, like his homies from the cafe.
I've never been, but as I understand it through cinema and other people who are from New York say that New York is like one of the loneliest places to be at, man. Like nobody wants to connect with anybody, and it's dirty, it's lonely, it's whatever, it's cold.
One of my favorite scenes was when he's talking to that ball guy, and the ball guy knows that he's feeling that this guy. Driver? Yeah, I forget what his name was.
The Wizard.
The Wizard. Yeah. I just you could feel like he's the only one realizing that this guy has something in his mind, something's brewing.
Not just that, but he kind of gave him the most logistical advice. It was like, man, you get a job and that's who you become.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're having a tough day, how about just drinking it off?
I think he even told him at some point. I don't know if it was in that same scene or earlier. He was like, "You need to get laid, man. Just go get laid." Same scene. Just go get laid.
And then Robert De Niro's just.
He's like, I have these crazy thoughts. I'm gonna do.
Yeah. You could tell like he's trying, like, okay, I'm trying to listen to this guy, but I think he's already making his mind up, like,
No, but it's also like a call for help. Like he's trying. He says, "You've been here a long time. You probably have had this feeling at some point in time. Mm-hmm. Can you help me? Like, how do you get through the days? How do you continue doing this?" And then he's just met with, Have you tried getting laid? Like, just...
And you know what
I thought it was good advice. I don't know. You thought it was just kind of
no,
like...
but it was like... It
Is
was
that the advice
not
you'd give me if
dismiss.
I'm having a bad day?
No, but it's just kind of being like a man to man. Like, get over it, man. Like,
But that's exactly. He's not seeking that. He's seeking true human connection. He's thinking, well, this guy's been nice to me. He's my friend. He's gonna like make me feel better. I didn't feel better.
No,
after
exactly.
that
No.
advice.
I think that's why they pulled it off so well.
But what I thought was even take it a step further. I forget the name of the character. The other cabbie who's the black dude inside. By the way, that we were talking about this.
Killer.
I was talking to Doug about this. Doug, who's the co-owner of this establishment and fellow New Yorker, by the way. He says when I told him, hey man, our next pick for the cafe is gonna be Taxi Driver, he like jumped through the roof, man. He was like, one of my favorite films of all time. Yeah, I want to hear you guys talk about it. We were talking about the cafeteria. He's from New York. He just moved to El Paso, a couple years ago. And we're talking about the cafeteria where the cabbies are hanging out. This location was actually a place where cab drivers would come and hang out.
Also, it was a legit spot.
And I was telling him that that it was, it's closed down and stuff, and they turned it into a hotel, but they kept the name as like an honor to these like cab drivers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Or to this place, right? But what I thought was interesting about that scene and coming into that character, the guy who was always trying to be cool with him, like, yo, that guy, right? It was so like fabricated human interaction that Travis got annoyed by it. I mean, partially due to the fact that he might be a little racist, right? But to me, it was just like, I don't want your fake hello. I don't want your fake like friendship connection. Like then that's why he's like, yo, I gotta talk to you, man. Come outside with me. That triggered him to be like, I need help, dude. If I'm gonna kill somebody, if I don't do something, if I don't get some type of human, give me some advice. So I thought that was a very interesting like hair trigger moment for Travis's character.
Before we kind of transition into like the end of things, are there any big moments that stood out for you as far as
performances?
Oh yeah, performances. How did you feel? I know you're saying that this was amazing for De Niro's character, and
Massive.
Yeah, but I guess kind of break that down. What was the big kind of hit of this film?
I just think he portrays his acting is terrific. I just think he portrays that that character who's really lonely and is seeking human interaction. I just think he did an amazing job, but I think the one that really stood out was Jodie Foster's character.
Okay,
really?
Yeah, she was 14. She's put in this character where she has to be, she has to act a little grownish, but still be kitty, when she's in the
Kitty form, whatever.
Yeah, kitty, I don't know, kitty form, like in the diner, or whatever.
She stood out more to you.
Yeah, she stood out a lot more to me, and then also Harvey Keitel,
His character.
Yeah, man,
Who wasn't even. By the way, his character wasn't even meant to be big, man. He had a couple of lines in the original script, and then once Harvey was drafted...
But he's the one that makes you feel that feeling where it's like, oh, man, he's the reason why this girl's there. You just want to kind of like... So...
By the way, Jodie Foster went on to do what she's known the most for, which is, if it's not Taxi Driver, it's Silence of the Lambs. To where she says explicitly that the reason she chose that role was because she wanted to be the opposite in terms of a psycho's. Like, she wanted to be the fixing of it as opposed to participating in it.
Oh, okay.
So that's why she went for the role of Silence of the Lambs, was for that reason.
Just to get out of that kind of...
And she became, she's still a phenomenal actress. Yeah. I think anything she does is pretty great.
Oh, yeah, but I just think Robert De Niro's character, man, just... the little subtleties of him, like, laughing, those little laughs where he's just very confrontational with the security guy, whatever.
Yeah.
I forgot how great he was in this, man. When I think about Robert De Niro, I think about how most people, for whatever god-awful reason, only know him because of Goodfellas. He plays a very small part in Goodfellas, if you really think about it. He gets top billing. He's the main dude in the poster, but he's definitely not the main character.
I think that's why I like this character a lot more, because I never saw Robert De Niro like this. Yeah, kind of like...
I felt the same way when I saw, like Dustin Hoffman. Instead of seeing it, like, I'd seen The Graduate and I had seen certain things, but when I saw him in...
Rain Man?
No, in Midnight... Well, Rain Man too, but Midnight Cowboy. When I saw him in Midnight Cowboy, man... That blew my mind, like that performance, and I think you're right. I think for De Niro, this was like, oh, this is good, true De Niro. This is what made De Niro a good actor, And Godfather 2 also, by the way, that role was fantastic. But you're right. I think the performance in this just like put De Niro in like this other level of acting.
And then I love how Martin just let him keep rolling.
Yeah.
Do the whole
and I guess that's
improvise.
probably like the show of like a good actor, when you're able to absorb that character enough to improvise on the role. You know, like. I mean, most of the time when we see stuff like this, we talk about how a lot of it's on book and it was really written so that way whoever's acting in it can play the character well. But then what makes a great actor is only he could really pull off.
A lot of people know this about Taxi Driver, but if you didn't know this, De Niro went out. He was doing a film in Italy with Bertolini's terrific director, Italian director, and he was flying back and forth between Italy and New York, because he actually got his taxi license and for a month did 12-hour shifts.
I would do that.
In a taxi just to get into the mindset of this character. And when it comes to method acting, I think people think like, I'm not going to break here, whatever Daniel Day-Lewis does or whatever type of thing, right? Which is great. Obviously gets great results. But when it comes to method of like the preparation that he puts, I think it's fantastic. Jodie Foster says that he asked Jodie's mom, like, hey, I want to take her to the diner and I want to rehearse her lines. Because, yeah, of course, go to the diner. And he's just trying to rehearse, and she gets tired, she gets bored. She's like, I got bored. I wanted to get out of there after a couple hours, and he wanted to keep going. And then I realized that he was teaching me the most important thing about acting, which was, if you're going to be sitting here in this diner and you're going to get bored with your character, she's like, what was interesting, what made me care about acting is that Robert started improvising lines. He taught me to build the character, not build the lines.
Right.
He taught me to deliver the performance, the arc of the character. He taught me that if I wanted to make up lines because she's my character, that I could. You know, he taught me that was the most important thing, and I didn't pay attention until I was like, oh, he's improvising. Like, I could do that. I could have fun with this guy. I could develop this character outside of the page.
Yeah, if certain directors
Yeah, so I thought that was very fascinating. Like, she probably took that tip with her to her Oscar win or whatever.
Exactly.
So, yeah, performance. Jodie learned some lessons, man.
Yeah.
And
you said this was her second one only, Bertie?
Well, with Marty.
With Marty, right?
I think she had done some TV stuff, but mostly Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, and then she did Taxi Driver.
I just think it takes a lot with that scene where, you know, he finally gets into the room with her, and then she's trying to, you know, I can make you feel good. Just that uncomfortableness of, you know, and then you start seeing Robert De Niro's character of, like, genuinely, like, no, what are you doing? Like, you know, kind of, like, struggling because, you know.
Well, you also see, like, that barrier that he hasn't had a successful human connection once. And in the time where he's, like, not only needs to make a connection, but needs to, like, in his mind, he needs to save this person.
Exactly.
He can't even get the words just right, so she'll stop doing whatever this is so she can, like, listen.
And she's so, like, in autopilot.
Yeah.
Like,
that's
she's just so, like, most guys are just wanting to go for it, and it's so weird that a guy doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
No, mister, let's go ahead and do it. Like,
no,
it's
even
just such an
got
autopilot.
15 minutes.
Yeah,
Come on,
yeah.
Even where, like, after he explains everything, it's like, okay, I think I get you. You saw me one time at a taxi, and you just want me now. Like, that's what it is, right? And he's just like, God, no. Like, you know.
You're missing the point.
Yeah.
Unless you have another point, I just want to make one more important note about the film before we get into, like, our audience questions and stuff. Yeah. I have to point out the music. Bernard Herrmann, one of the most hauntingly beautiful scores I've ever heard in my life. The saxophone, this beautiful saxophone motif, right? We talked about motif in the Mood for Love episode and why it's so important. And Bernard Herrmann, if you don't know who he is, this man made iconic scores for Hitchcock. He did Psycho. He did North by Northwest. He started his career by making the score for Citizen Kane. Wow. He made the score for Citizen Kane. He wrote his bones with Orson Welles and Radio and then made the Citizen Kane score. What's important to note about this film is that this was Bernard Herrmann's last film. And forget about that. At first, he didn't want to do it. He was like, yeah, I read the script and the violence is kind of turning me off. I don't know if I want to do this. And then he kept reading and he's like, no, you know what? I think I like it. I think I can do this. He recorded for 2 days after he wrote the music. On the second day, after he finished his session, he had finished all the music. He met his deadline. He died that night.
No way.
Yeah. He died that night after finishing the score of Taxi Driver.
That's why it's
that was his last score. And his daughter says, you know, you could tell, like, that wasn't my father anymore. My father was on the last legs of his life, but I think part of him just wanted to work until his dying day. And that's why he said yes to Taxi Driver.
Respect, yeah.
But Bernard Herrmann was a legend in cinema way before Taxi Driver. I mean, he did Psycho, just like Psycho, Citizen Kane, like just those 2 films alone. He did a whole lot more. But I think it's important to note that the music, just like the city of New York, just like Travis Bickle, the music is a character in this film.
Oh yeah.
The music itself is a character of this film, of moments of like, when that motif comes into play, Travis's life is pretty good. You know, he's feeling better about himself. He's feeling better about the city of New York. It paints it like a pretty picture. And then, you know, when the score is non-existent, by the way, we see a huge pause. This motif is repeated and repeated and repeated. We hear the saxophone time and time again for the first act. And then we don't hear it when he meets Betsy. After, like, the bad moments happen, we don't hear it until he meets Iris. And after after she agrees to breakfast, then we hear the score again.
Wow.
You know, so this score itself was a huge. If this score didn't exist in this film, I don't think this film would have been as successful or as punchy. You know,
I think what makes it even punchier is that not the last time we see it, but one of the times we see it without him being in the frame is when Iris is with that guy. I forgot what the character's name. Sport.
The record player.
Yeah, and he plays it, and it's that song, and then it's just like, oh my god, like,
wow.
You know. And at that moment in time, the score didn't feel as romantic of New York City. It felt manipulative. You know, it was really that moment.
Even
that
was an illusion, right?
Yeah, that was an illusion. That was just, you know, a pretty song he could play so he could dance with her and manipulate her into like staying in this terrible world that she was in, and that's.
By the way, Keitel, I mean, he's obviously a terrific actor. Most people know him now because of Pulp Fiction and other Tarantino stuff he did, but he was Marty's De Niro before De Niro. He did 2 films with Marty, Who's That Knocking at My Door and Mean Streets.
Yeah.
He was the lead in Mean Streets.
Yeah.
De Niro was the second character. That's how they met and got him on board. But Harvey Keitel, man, watch his early stuff. Watch Mean Streets. Watch Who's That Knocking at My Door. If you can find it, that film's pretty hard to find. But it's his performance is terrific. And for him to take this minor role and turn it into what he turned it into, that slow dancing scene is the most uncomfortable moment for this character, right? So, watch that performance as well.
Q&A.
Any other final points before we get into our Q&A?
I want to see the Q&A. What's going on?
Who's got something to say? Come on up. Austin's got a mic ready for anybody who wants to give an opinion. Rating. What do you guys rate this film? Anybody who wants to talk about Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver, you could just come up and give a quick note, you know?
I'm looking at you.
Oh, man.
I can tell that you have...
This guy seems
the
like
law is calling out a fellow director here in El Paso who I would think might be very influenced by this film, considering your style. But.
I kept seeing him covering his mouth like, no, don't spoil it. I already know most of these fun facts.
Nobody's obligated to, but whoever wants to come up and just give a quick note on...
No, they're obligated if they want to come back.
Wow.
I just think...
Yeah.
I have a good Harvey Keitel connection.
Come up here. Come up here to the mic. Yeah, because then we can't hear you or see you on the cameras.
Fun fact about the person
I love fun
on the
facts.
mic.
By the way, fellow reminder, if you guys come up, you get a free gift from Creative El Paso.
Fun fact about the person coming up to the mic.
Harvey
That's the
Keitel.
best.
This is a fun fact.
What's up? You're from New York.
Yeah.
Doug, it's important to note that this is one of your favorite films. You're from New York. Yeah. You literally point out, hey, man, when they were shooting this, it was on this street and this street.
So where Martin Scorsese was looking at the woman in the window, that's 5 Tudor City Place. I used to live in that building.
Oh, my gosh. That's great.
But this is a Harvey Keitel thing.
Okay.
So, you know, before I left New York, I was a court reporter for 30 years.
Right.
That's right, a court stenographer. My father was a court stenographer like me. We didn't work together, but that's how I knew about this job. And not in court, depositions like that you do for law firms. So when my father was a young man, he had a desk in a court reporting agency, and the desk next to his, the court reporter that he was his office buddy, was Harvey Keitel. He was a court reporter.
What?
So, yeah. So, and he acted just like that in real life. He was like a tough guy. So by total coincidence, I met Harvey Keitel. And I told him, do you know Mel Winter? That's my father.
Okay.
And he said, yeah, I remember Mel Winter. I go, he's my father. He goes, yeah, he owes me money. He says, in 1958, your father was going to the track, and I gave him money to put on the horse. And my horse came in, and your father claimed he never put the bet in. So he owes me money. Anyway, that's funny.
That's good.
That's amazing. That's a great moment right there. Awesome. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Doug. Come on up, Anthony.
I knew he wanted to say something.
Anthony's a fellow film director.
Yeah.
His films are terrific, man.
Fun
Terrific,
fact
terrific,
about
terrific.
Anthony: he's learning Japanese.
He is learning Japanese. I commend Anthony. He's going to Japan. He's about to take a trip to Japan, and he like really when he wants to learn to make a certain dish, when he wants to learn a language, he's like committed.
dead
Man.
set.
This dude's
Start out with
awesome.
something Japanese.
Oh yeah, give us a line.
And
Give
he
us
helps out.
Talking about the film or something.
give us
No,
you
no.
talking to me in Japanese.
Oh,
Yeah, you're talking to me?
do you know taxi driver in Japanese?
Oh no, I don't. Sorry.
That's the fun fact. He doesn't know that. But
I'll
that's
just say konbanwa, konbanwa,
Konbanwa.
konbanwa.
What does that
Yeah.
mean?
Good evening.
All right,
love it.
come on,
I
everybody.
love it.
So I got a question for the three of you, and it's usually I guess the ending, and I always have this conversation with my friends, and we always guess, okay, did he really die? Like my theory,
Oh.
my theory is that I think he is in a coma, and he's kind of thinking about like that's what would happen.
Right.
And then another theory I thought, well, before, because after watching this, I thought he was just dead. Like, that's it.
This is a huge
Right.
debate, by the way,
Oh, really?
amongst fans of this film.
Because they mentioned that he's still in a coma, like
Yeah.
that whole voiceover moment.
So watching it again tonight, I was like, okay, I think he's in a coma, and that's like maybe he's thinking, okay, that might happen.
That's
but
what,
Sure.
what do you think? What do you think?
I think that's a very like if you guys have seen All That Jazz, that's a very interesting kind of introspective moment to think about that. All That Jazz's ending is very like this dude's on his deathbed and he's like hallucinating this whole musical number. So I think that's an interesting way to put it, but I took it for the literal sense. I wanted that payoff for Travis, you know. I think that's a very artistic choice. If that's the case, I don't think Marty meant it to be. Let me tell you why. Well, give you guys his opinion, and then I'll shatter the
then
glass
you're
for you.
gonna,
But I'm with you too. I thought
You
he
think it was-
died.
you thought
I
he
was
died.
hoping he died just so, so he could live like a legend or whatever.
Shot through the neck. He's
yeah,
dead.
but then hearing that, kind of that's like him in a coma, thinking that's what could have happened.
That's the desire he wanted it
well,
to
that's
be.
sort of like I
Exactly.
was saying, that whole
I'm
like
with
bird's
that.
eye view is just like a snapshot of then the full scene, you know, what people are going to remember. I guess that legend of the girl cowering on the side and all these people dead and him being the one on the couch. I mean, I don't think that he's just dead and that's it and this is all just some kind of like hope.
Fever.
So he just
there
recovered?
is something to like that girl of all people going and getting him in the taxi again and trying to talk to him and say like,
But
hey,
that's
so I
a
saw-
cinematic like movie like.
What did you think? Like, okay, he got shot a couple of times, one in the neck. You see him clean
What do you mean?
at the end.
He just doesn't like how nice.
But
he
that
looks.
time has passed.
Yeah,
right?
but
I mean,
scars
his hairs
last.
grow back. His hairs grow back.
Scars last.
By the way, that mohawk was fake. Just FYI.
Really?
He didn't shave his head because he still had scenes to shoot with his hair after that. So it was a bald
Oh,
cap,
right.
and it was pretty great. That piece is in the museum in New York. By the way, you could go see Travis Bickle's
this
mohawk.
guy would only know that.
Anyways, just FYI. But
I think he was alive. I
think he was alive?
I want to say that, you know, for some reason he survived everything, and they didn't want to keep him in jail for all this murder that just casually happened.
Exactly.
Like
Leave him both
they
dead
want
to
to
this
let
point.
him go out.
no,
and
because he's painted as
be
a hero. The
taxi.
media, the
still gotta go to court.
The
You
art
still-
of spin works. I mean, if you're gonna present some guy as a hero, people are gonna look at him as a hero. Court people are gonna look at him as a hero. Cops are gonna look at him as a hero. So I think newspapers have a lot of power, right? So I took it for the literal sense. Even the first time I saw it without knowing nothing about the film and nothing about the development of the character afterwards, I took it for the literal sense because I wanted the payoff for him. I wanted him to if all this is true, like I love the theory, by the way. I think it's fascinating to think about. But if to me that's kind of like, well, then what was the point, right? Like, we get to a point where it's like, well, if he doesn't have that final moment with Betsy's character, I love that moment. That's a terrific moment for him to be like, I'm good, so long. If he's just
No, I do
imagining
love
all
that
this,
scene.
you
I
know, if
do
he's
love
just
that scene.
imagining all this, to me, it's moot. You know,
No, I do
so-
love that.
No,
scene
because
for
then it
sure.
goes back to like the whole fever dream of
Yeah.
him maybe imagining that things are going to be better if he shoots a politician. you
By
know?
the way, the Paul Schrader, the writer, says that the last frame of the film, you know, after he leaves this and leaves a girl and stuff in rear view, to him, he wanted this to kind of be like a Mobius strip. The last frame of the film could be the first frame of the film, and the story could just start all over.
Cool.
again.
Yeah.
Right? So just to kind of paint a picture for you, but I will say this, Anthony, Marty never meant it to be. If that's people's interpretation, that's great. That's what cinema's all about. Marty was developing a sequel with Paul Schrader, believe it or not. Yeah.
So that's why he lived.
This sequel was in development. No. They weren't thinking about the sequel back then. This sequel was in development all the way up until 2013. Paul Schrader wrote a draft. Marty and Bob De Niro read it, and they were both like, it's not good enough. We're not going to do it.
Taxi Driver, too hard to kill.
But the reason I say that is that people have come up to Marty and been like, hey, did he die? Did he not die? And Marty says, he didn't die. That's not how I meant it to be, because sure, he's the hero in the end, but because we were later thinking this is such a great moment that we made him a hero at the end, because in the sequel, he's not going to be a hero. We're going to flip the script on this guy, and we're really going to show him for who he truly is. He had a great moment, great, but that's not the end of Travis Bickle. So Marty didn't meant it to be that way. I think, again, cinema's left for interpretation. So I think it's a great moment to explore for sure. But
Do you think it's...
No, well, you think coma, right? Which
Yeah, no, I think he's in the coma. He's just, you don't know if he's going to last or wake up or die. So, yeah, I don't know.
fair.
But I think that whole interpretation changes how the film really ends. Does it end on this heroic, triumphant moment that he...
Very ambiguous, which is fine. A lot of films do that. That's great. I think like I said, I think it's a cool theory that holds a lot of weight.
Yeah.
I think that theory could, for sure, could be a case. I don't interpret it that way.
Anthony, do you have a rating on this film?
It's one of my favorite films, so I'm going to give it a solid 10.
There you go.
Oh, there we go.
Your films are very heavily influenced by this film, I think, in terms of style. I see a lot of Taxi Driver in your films. Would you say?
Yeah, I think subconsciously, yeah, maybe.
Because it's one of your favorite films, right? I mean,
car
I
scene,
mean that in a
cut the
good way. I mean that as a compliment. You know, Joker did it in the most stealing way possible, but when I see like Paranoid Flux, when I see your films, I like, oh man, this has a very Taxi Driver feel to it.
Cut the text scene
Cut
in
the
the
tech.
car.
Yeah.
See?
So
Taxi,
yeah, absolutely,
car,
man.
I'm seeing similarities.
Great.
Let's go.
Yeah. Well, thank you for
Thank you,
having
man.
me. Thank you.
Anthony, get your prize from Austin. He'll afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
But anybody else? Anybody kind of final
ratings.
thoughts, questions? Yeah, come on up. Eric, you're next.
Wow.
Yeah, man. You got to talk about Taxi Driver.
Come on through. I'm sorry that we made such a trip hazard, but thank you for surviving it.
What's your name?
What's
Tell us
your
your name.
My name's Una.
Una.
Nice
to meet you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
I was kind of hoping you guys would touch on this a bit more,
Okay.
especially when the times you've brought up Joker. I think this is such a timeless film,
Oh, okay.
and it's like one that like in '76 is very like important, but also it's really important now. But I wonder what you guys think of kind of how this film has kind of been turned into like kind of a film that like men have projected themselves onto a bit.
Oh, that's interesting. Sure.
In the same vein as like Joker, Fight Club, American Psycho. And it's taken these things of like anti-hero into full-on blown hero and like
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I think for one, this film is just a character study on the psychoanalytics of somebody like this. I'm willing to bet therapists and, you know, people who study psychology sit and watch this character like, is there any connotation?
Here would be the warning signs.
Here would be the warning signs, but more so like what you're saying is like, is this character a quote-unquote macho guy that can be identified with? I think it goes deeper into that.
Yeah.
So, man, that's very interesting. I wouldn't throw this in the same category as something like Fight Club, where it's a guys movie,
Yeah.
like that type of thing. But
I don't think it's in the same category, but I think all those films have been championed by a certain group of men in the same way. Like, you know,
sure.
like Travis Bickle.
Let me ask you, do you find that, just so we want to know the context of how to address it, right? Do you find that to be a negative thing?
I don't think it's a negative thing about the film. I think that's just something like that happens when you have a film this big and with the character that like transgressive and vibrant, and you let a big audience watch it.
I think it's that whole complication with a character that's this aggressive, where maybe you're not supposed to be rooting for that kind of response to this society.
But the fact that he channeled it through the quote-unquote proper ways at the end is almost like a success story.
It's basically like, get this guy who is angry at society and angry at everything that's going on. He was about to shoot a politician, and it would have ended in a much different way. But at the end, it's like, oh, but you shot other people, and because you did it to save this one person, you're now a hero, and we're going to make nice little collectibles out of you.
I think that
it's going to be all shiny.
I think that's great
It's problematic,
perspective.
right?
I do think also in its most foundational foundational level, unfortunately, I think the boy grows up to be the guy who wants to be the guy in shining armor who saves a girl. So I think ultimately men identify with that. You want to be the guy who's the hero to a certain degree. And though this is the most anti-hero becomes vigilante hero story, I think ultimately that's why guys are like, yeah, he fucked these guys up and he shot them and these guys were prostituting this young girl. He got what he deserved. I think that's ultimately, as caveman as that sounds, I think ultimately that's why guys identify.
What a weird year, because 76, I mentioned earlier, Rocky came out.
Right.
Which my father just would like to believe that he is Rocky.
Right.
And he went through the same Philadelphia story, which, he's a teacher. Yeah.
Let me ask you something. Should this because you're right. I identify with a character that wants to connect and wants so hard to connect that maybe he does it the wrong way sometimes. Yeah. And more so, he's striving for this so much that isn't that life to a certain degree? You want something so much that when you're trying to obtain it, you don't end up getting it, but when you kind of let it go, you end up being a better person and maybe you get it again, right? So I really identify with that character for those reasons. And he's a man, right? So it's easier to identify, but would women see this as a character piece at all? Would women care for this?
I think so. I mean, I really like this film. I've always liked this film. But I do think it's interesting to listen to conversations of men and women talking about this film and to see the way that men don't really, or sometimes overlook the way that, don't
be shy.
No. The ending, Travis Bickle saving Jodie Foster and that whole relationship. Mm-hmm. It only happens because he forcibly imposes himself on her and her life, true. Just like he does with Betsy. She didn't ask for that, and I guess. You could say in the end it does a good thing, but it's not like he's saving Jodie Foster's character because he really wants to do the right thing and is saving her from something. He's doing it so it can give him purpose.
I have a question for you because I think there's something that saves the character in terms of that regard. How do you interpret the moment in the cab when he first met her?
Well,
I know it's not an invitation to be helped, but how would you interpret that?
It's not an invitation to be helped, but he could have driven off when she asked to be driven off, and he doesn't. And I guess you could say he tries to go on a redemption arc by saving her and this. But
he should have driven off. Yeah, and I'm gonna make right. I'm gonna do right by this.
And you also have to think okay, she's back with her parents. She's going to school. Woohoo! Mm-hmm. But also he's made her watch this extremely traumatizing violent act.
Well, then again, though, I'll push back a little bit there. She was already experiencing a pretty bad lifestyle, right?
Definitely, but
she probably had already seen somebody get shot right in front of her, considering her lifestyle.
Yeah, I do like the perspective of saying it's problematic to view this person as a hero for everything that's going on because, I don't want to sit at the end of the day and think that he had that full hero's arc. Mm-hmm. I mean, very much.
It was never meant to be that. Yeah, it was never meant to be that. But
you can't, and I never even thought of the perspective of this guy just really does force himself. He's no different than me dressing up in armor and then drunkenly kicking down a door and being like, "I'm here to save you." There's no.
I mean, call it a happy accident. Call it something. Yeah, forcibly that happened, but I think ultimately the result was pretty great. Yeah. Right. The unorthodox. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I agree. It's a terrific perspective. Yeah. But I think the unorthodox hero story in the weaved into Taxi Driver is pretty special. This could happen to anybody, even if their intentions weren't always in the right place. I think this could happen to anybody, and that's what makes it pretty special. I think you're right. I think it's just left for interpretation. But in my head, I'm like, well, if I would have read this story in the newspaper, I would have been rooting for this guy to a certain degree, right?
Really?
Yeah.
But that's also because of how they painted him at the end.
Sure.
They painted him as, coming in, saving the day, even though by means of violence. And
also, for somebody who has these kind of mental health issues, pretty impressive in terms of again, he could have channeled all of this into the negative place that he was heading for. And for him to make the call to be like, you know what, this girl's, ultimately, I also think that the coin has two sides, right? If she genuinely didn't want his help, she could have very well rejected it entirely. But she agreed to meet with him. She agreed to tell her story, right? I mean, she kind of had to play a role in that too.
Well, she's also like 12.
Well, yeah.
And he's like a full-grown
but
man.
she's making big girl decisions.
No, but I mean,
But I mean, there's a big difference in that. She doesn't have I mean, she thinks she has agency. We think she has agency because she's a prostitute and she's running on these streets of New York.
Right.
But she doesn't have agency
But
at
she was
all.
also forced. You're right. Her age is very telling, right? But she's also forced to grow up at a very early age.
Yeah, but
You know? I think that does give her some agency, and I only speak from perspective in terms of like when you have some childhood trauma, no matter what it is, it kicks you in the butt to get mature really quickly. And if you're going to survive in these streets, in her case, I mean, she's got to play with the big girls, right, to a certain degree. I agree, she's 12 and she knows what she's talking about to a certain point, but she made her bed, you know what I mean, quite literally. So, like, whether she still has a choice to make, you know, she could walk away from this lifestyle, she could participate in it.
it's not as easy as that, though.
Yeah,
and I
no,
think
A
we're
little
showing.
bit.
no,
I mean,
but I'll say that
at its most foundational level. Like, I'm not trying to reduce it, but in its most foundational level,
But I'll say that
she's
when-
very well aware that, like, I could walk away from this whenever I want.
But could she? And I think that's the problem. Like she was thrown into this world where, at the moment, you know, a child experiencing that this is how you make your money. This is how
I have a final
this is
question.
how you sustain living.
I have a
for
final
better, for
question
worse.
for the sake of the argument. If that's the case, I think it's a weird double standard. If we saw a woman, taxi driver, see the situation happen and try to save the girl, what gives the woman, for instance, more agency to help this little girl out? You know what I mean? Like, just because he's a man or has intentions of like self-glory, which I don't think is the full case. He's a much more authentic character. He's a much more layered character than that. I don't think he was just seeking the glory. I think he saw a bad situation, thought maybe I can do something to rectify this. And if it's just rectifying his own actions or whatever, if he didn't take the first step to make it right the first time and drive off, at the end of the day, he redeems himself, right? At least in my eyes. So I think there's something to explore there. I think it would have been a different situation and maybe would have been more forgiving if a grown woman was trying to help this girl out. Did she have more agency? Would she have less agency? I don't think so. I think a grown adult is seeing something terrible happen to a young girl, knows that calling the cops probably is just going to put her in the same situation all over again, doesn't have the best history with police either. I don't know. I think there's a lot to explore there. I think just like you're saying, it's not as easy as for her. He's as much of a layered character as Iris is. And sure, she has a lot of growing up to do, but if she can't speak for herself, ultimately Travis spoke for her, and the result for her, I think, ended up being pretty great. I mean, that's just my perspective, though. But
Get him.
no.
Yeah.
I think your comment about a female taxi driver is kind of interesting because I don't think that film could be made and championed. Like, I don't think it'd be.
That's like yeah.
And I mean, I'm also a big Paul Schrader fan, and there's something to be said of the way he's obsessed with transgressive men who journal. But
Yeah,
I think if you made this film and if it was a woman directing, I mean, it depends on the woman, but the remedy to everything would not be violence in the same way that Taxi Driver is, maybe with a few exceptions of like directors like Catherine Breillat and stuff.
Right.
But this is a quintessentially like macho film, and a big part of the reason why like there's so much violence in the film, and that's the remedy for everything. And like Travis Bickle can go out and do all these things is because he's a man and because there's an entitlement that maybe he isn't like shown because he's not upfront entitled, but it's there.
I think you're ultimately right. At its most foundational level, you're ultimately right. And this is the last thing I'll say about it. Scorsese didn't go out to make a documentary. He didn't go out to make a social justice piece. He didn't go out to make a piece about this lifestyle necessarily. He meant to write out, I hate to use that Tarantino escape, but like he meant to just make a cool story, you know, that he envisioned as a man, right, ultimately, or that he saw in Paul Schrader's script, right? So I think you're right. I think contextually and in social cues, there's a lot not great about this film, especially in today's climate, but I think if a storyteller is ultimately just trying to tell a good story, and that if we wanted to see the true realism behind something like this happening or what both perspectives were experiencing to its core, maybe we should see a documentary about it, right? Like, I don't think he was trying to do that either.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
like films like this that portray characters that like aren't holy people or aren't fully good, you know,
Yeah.
have flaws and
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
complicated are really important.
Yeah.
But what happens when audiences take that away and
Sure.
they want to purify these characters or
Right,
you know
right.
make them into
Yeah, that's why I said it, by the way. This guy's in no way, shape, or form
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
saint in the slightest. I agree with you. Yeah, he's not.
Yeah.
He definitely isn't. But he did a good deed. He did at least that one day. Whether his
Yeah.
according
He take
to
it
the
out.
writer, he was not
Yeah.
going to continue to do good deeds later, right?
Yeah.
So
The good deed being that was the storytelling kind of
Right,
like plot, you know,
Sure,
that we need to have this character go through this journey, this build up.
Yeah.
Certain moments had to happen,
Right.
and then the climax being that even if he can't communicate properly or do the right things, I mean, you know. Not that he succeeded or was doing it for the right reasons, but going into like politics where you think it's doing things the right way, you know, trying to fight for,
Yeah.
you know, justice and, you know, cleaning up the streets in the right way.
Yeah.
Even the politicians wouldn't give him the time of day because he's not a part of that world.
No, of
so
course not.
he
But,
took
I mean,
them to the old hands.
ultimately,
Yeah.
it's a very complicated perspective that we could probably do a whole podcast on alone. So I appreciate it. I think it's great. I think that definitely opens up the eyes for people to see this in a new way. What I love about this film is every time you see it, and every time I see it anyways, I see a different film, which is very special. So again, we could definitely dissect that a whole lot, which is great. And what I love about this conversation, by the way, is we're not tippy-toeing around what we both feel the film is, right? So, or what we all feel the film is. So I thought it was great. But a rating, if any,
maybe an 8 out of 10.
8 out of 10.
Cool.
Yeah, just because a few of the flaws I find in the script.
Sure. Absolutely. And you're very much a fan of Paul Schrader, and you know his.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
That's
get
awesome,
it.
man.
I get it. Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming up.
One of the best questions, oh yeah.
Yeah.
You can hear me from here, right?
I hope so. I don't know, Austin. Yeah. Can we? Yeah.
I know it's late. There's something that always disturbed me about this movie.
Uh huh.
And I was waiting to see if somebody brought it up. You know, nobody ever talks about, you know, at the end, there's the parents are writing a letter.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for bringing Iris back,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Nobody ever thinks about, we're assuming you know, she wasn't kidnapped. She was a runaway,
Right.
right?
Right.
So you don't think about, is she necessarily rescued? She might be back.
Into a bad situation.
Bad situation.
Oh.
And nobody
Yeah.
ever talks about that.
That's true,
Why
I mean,
in the
but-
world was she in New York with this pimp in the first place?
That was it was it is a crazy perspective, but it's also one of those crazy what ifs that we'll never know about.
But maybe that's the way Martin Scorsese thinks. Like she was being bad and she left her parents.
No, I don't think so. I don't
or-
think that's the eyes we're seeing it in. I think that she's a very strong-willed character, period. And I think that strong-willed characters exist. If a kid runs away from home, and he had a pretty good suburban life, and he just was in the midst of teenage
It always
angst.
seemed to
I
me
mean,
that she probably had some kind of bad life.
maybe
I feel
it's
like,
definitely
That's
it's
what I was,
definitely-
yeah.
And it was like that was a gap in the
Yeah.
movie for me.
Okay, that's fair. I mean,
I
ultimately,
just feel like, again, it goes back to being like one of those little bow ties. Like, the only way we can make the story work and everything's into a
Exactly.
nice little package is the parents have to be like, and now she's happy and going to school. And that's...
All Scorsese.
let me throw this at you. How fake do we think a certain character is, right? If the parents didn't care enough, they probably wouldn't even have written the letter. They probably wouldn't have thanked them, right? If they didn't care and they were like, "We got this child back," and what
That's
were they?
actually pretty good, yeah.
I mean, if they didn't care, why would we have the letter? If they didn't care, if they treated this character badly, there's no contextual evidence of anything, right? So we don't know if the parents are good or bad. The only inclination we get about them is she thinks my parents hated me. A 12-year-old thinks that their parents hate them when they take away their toy.
Typically, yeah.
I mean, again, it's a question of her age too. It's a question of her
Yeah.
maturity. She could have just said that out of like, my parents hated me because I got a D in school, whatever. We don't know. She's young. What we do know is that the adult parent writing a letter to this quote unquote hero was pretty heartwarming and pretty like, hey, we got our baby back. Thank you.
Oh, it made me suspicious, but okay.
It made you suspicious, the letter? Hey, that's great. That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other last points, guys, before we wrap it up? We're about to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Come on over. I think this will be the last one, guys. We're going on. No, hit on up. I think we're up on 2 hours or something, right? Yeah. Cool. Come on up, man.
Don't trip.
Yeah, right there. Right by
Yeah.
the microphone.
Get cozy.
What's your
All
name?
right. My name's David.
David.
David,
cozy?
thanks for coming, man. Thank you.
Oh no, thank you guys. Yeah, it's one of my.
And thank you both of you because we never met you guys and you totally new to our podcast, I think. So thank you guys.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, you were on last
You
time.
were. You asked
I
a
was on
question
Nicolas
last
Cage.
time.
Yeah, he was
For
on
family.
For
Yes,
family,
exactly.
man.
Yeah,
For our
yeah.
Christmas episode.
I remember people who talk about my picks.
Well, now he's going to talk about mine, Bilal. So
Jesus.
I'm sorry.
Make it quick. Don't
ahead.
even give him the time.
No,
of
by the
day.
way, his question was controversial even on Family Man, man. You remember this?
No, everybody
You
hated
sparked-
Family Man. Anyway, moving on.
Okay.
David, what's your question? You're right, man. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you. It's more of like some thoughts and like a reading because it's kind of very similar to was it Una?
Luna.
Yeah, Luna or Una?
Una.
Una. Right. Okay. Yeah, because for
Was this
me,
your first time seeing this?
No.
Okay.
But like I've seen it like growing up and like at different moments, like I've
Sure.
had like different, like I've had the interpretation like, yeah, that guy's a fucking hero, you know? It's like, but then, you know,
But then
growing
you
up,
grow
you're
up
like,
and
yeah.
kind of a creep.
And so for me, I think there's, again, it's not judging, because I don't think the movie's sort of saying one thing. I think it's what it's doing is presenting sort of a scenario.
Yeah.
And I'm a big fan of Paul Schrader. And again, he's the whole journaling thing. That's like a.
I think I'm getting two bigger fans of Paul Schrader than fans of Scorsese. That's really cool.
Yeah, man, it's okay.
Scorsese, one of the best filmmakers of all
But not
time.
Paul
Of
Schrader.
course.
No, but you guys are putting. No, I'm glad that's the case. By the way, that Paul Schrader gets some love. He's a damn talented filmmaker. I mean, he's a damn talented. He's great.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of writing in the movie, like in the journal,
Absolutely.
and like the voice and like dialogue and stuff. So I think that's why. It's
I also think
Paul
it's safe to
Schrader.
say that if Scorsese's going to direct your film, you're not going to be the shining star in this film. Like he's going to take it away and make it his own, and that's pretty fair. But
Right.
Paul Schrader's powerful, man. He's great.
Yeah, I agree. But I think there's like a duality where I think it comes from Paul Schrader's sort of influence of how much he loves Japanese cinema and like
Sure.
the whole idea of the samurai. So, you know, in the
That's true.
East, there's the samurai. On the West is John Wayne, the cowboy.
These guys were heavily influenced by Kurosawa. Heavily influenced by Kurosawa, who was this type of storyteller for sure.
Exactly. And, you know, even like the climactic battle, it's like a samurai
Yeah,
thing with the
absolutely.
whole blood gushing and whatever. But I sort of think like the complication is, you know, with samurais, there's a lot of honor. And I wouldn't call Travis Bickle like an honorable
Sure,
character,
sure.
or he's operating on a sort of honorable code.
Yeah.
Because he was like his thing. I'm gonna kill the candidate, and then his
Very
sort
easy
of,
choice for him to make.
yeah,
right?
and his mission of like saving is he's a letter with some money. Like,
Yeah.
like the whole like, oh, he's a hero. Like at the that's just like a last minute thing of
Yeah.
like,
Sure.
God damn it, I didn't blow my load over here.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do it over here.
yeah.
No, and then even
And then
like
pun intended with the load.
Yeah.
No, even with him about to kill himself at the end, there doesn't feel like the filmmaker didn't want him to seem like this honorable kind of like
No,
I did my
no,
duty.
no,
now
no.
I can be sent off.
By the
into
way,
wind.
look, if you've
it's
seen,
very
like,
much like
let's call a spade a spade. If you've seen any one of Marty's films that talks about any of this, when you see a character piece from Marty, when you see The Departed, when you see, for instance, in The Departed, nobody can be defined as a good character in that film entirely. All of them either kill each other or die or whatever. So, like, other than the Mark Wahlberg character, which ends up being kind of like the good guy. But when you see Wolf of Wall Street, when you see Goodfellas, they're all cautionary tales. This is absolutely a cautionary tale that ends up having a very human ending that could happen to anybody, right? But I agree with you. I don't think Marty or Paul were aiming to present this knight in shining armor. I think as men, we love it. We eat it up.
Yeah.
But I don't think that was the intention.
But again, going
agree.
back to even like what Una was saying earlier, this kind of problematic idea where if you just throw this in, that this guy goes in,
Yeah.
kicks a bunch of ass, and then walks away, and he lives at the end, and then even the girl that rejected him earlier says like, hey, like I read the papers, and I'm the hero, like, and you don't
Yeah.
think more into the character and the problems
Sure.
and, you know,
It's
the
like-
psychology behind it, then
Yeah.
you're left with this guy who's honestly like a threat to society,
Yeah.
painting himself like a samurai, you know?
Yeah, but it's also perspective is everything, right? Like, for instance, when we watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and we think about Tarantino's it's having a similar approach, right? The last 10 minutes are the most violent things of the whole film or whatever. Rick Dalton was trying to further his career. He wasn't trying to save anybody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But by him doing so, by him defending himself and torching somebody, it changed history as we knew it, right? It saved somebody who we all, were rooting to live when we read back to the Manson murders and stuff like that, right? So again, just storytelling in its foundational level, right? The societal shortcomings of it, I absolutely get, and I totally get that perspective. But and we're rooting for the story to a certain degree, right? We're rooting for the character in the story. Whether we think that character is a saint or not, it's totally subjective. All of this is subjective. But I don't think that was the intention of the storyteller to begin with.
Right. The point I'm trying to make is sort of what it's, because I don't think like the movie's trying to make like one very clear statement. Right. But what I'm trying to say, it's what I think it illuminates in sort of the people's reaction is that duality, where I think it comes from East versus West, which is the idea that in the West, very much all of our heroes and then now anti-heroes, it's always sort of the lone gunman. Like the one individual, like, oh, fuck the system. Fuck the book. I'm going to do justice.
Their own.
Right, exactly. And I think that's a very Western idea.
Absolutely.
As opposed to sort of the East, where it's about the collective.
We were just talking about that. We were talking about how A Fistful of Dollars has a very similar structure.
Right,
and it's a Western.
It's basically the remake of Yojimbo.
Right, Yojimbo, Akira Kurosawa film, right? Yeah. So like, but again, in a Western fashion, it's like, oh, this guy's a badass, and we're gonna root for him because he saves the girl, or he tries to save the girl, and then that whole thing kind of goes to shit.
But
too.
Yeah, but that's sort of where I'm coming from in terms of how illuminating, because how you say like. There's a lot of Taxi Driver, a lot of King of Comedy in Joker,
right?
But there's also a lot of Taxi Driver in Batman. Like if you read like the Batman Year One, like the Frank Miller, even in the back, like the special features, like in the back of the graphic novel, there's like lines from the script, and it's like when he's out of costume trying to like blend in the city, it's like Travis Bickle. Like he's described as like Travis Bickle.
Very cool.
And then in this last Batman movie, he like the. What's it called? Like the shooter thing with the rope? He has it like this sort of the same mechanism.
That's interesting perspective, by the way. Just putting it in that context, I think that's interesting. Like, do you see Travis Bickle as Batman or Joker?
That's sort of what I mean. Where he's like, in our society, we sort of. It's become like muddled. Both sides of the coin. You know what I'm saying?
Even in society, it's muddled, right? There's nobody pure. Like it's a very shitty world, and if you root for the guy, cool. If you don't, cool. It's your perspective. But I think that's great perspective from both of you, by the way. Is he Batman or Joker? That's interesting. That's very interesting.
I'll flip a coin and I'll tell you. But
exactly.
Just because we're gonna have to end off.
Yeah.
Can we get your rating?
10, of course.
10.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
10. 8, 10. Wow. Fantastic.
Oh, and I just want to say like a cool thing.
The men gave
like
it
if
10.
you're
I'm
a
with you.
fan,
I got you.
That was weird. Okay.
I like novelizations of like films.
Yeah.
I think this one's really interesting because it's the diary. It's not like a novel.
Sure.
It's Travis Bickle's diary.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's if you can find it on Amazon, eBay, whatever.
I gotta look it up.
Check it out.
David, thank you, man.
David,
Oh, thank you guys.
Appreciate you.
A returning character.
Thank you, everybody.
A returning guy. Yeah, I know, man. I'm sorry to recognize you.
I know. Thank you, everybody, for coming out and listening to us and staying well past your bedtimes.
Your final ratings. That's
My
it.
final ratings.
Did it change?
It stayed at a 9.5. Wonderful
9.5.
film. I loved where it was headed. In every direction. I loved also the perspective and how there's so much more to dissect.
Absolutely.
Especially going from the story straightforward to the psychoanalysis of loneliness and how it affects men's psyche and everything.
The brain.
I love it.
Great.
What about you?
Did it change?
Me, it kind of changed with Una's and David's kind of interpretation with
9.9.
Yeah. 8.9.
Oh
Really?
man, jeez.
Wow.
Nice.
Hey,
No, 'cause
you
it's
did
good.
that, Luna.
It's a
You
good-
brought him down a whole point.
You brought him down a peg.
I see people
No,
clapping.
she got me thinking. They got me thinking about this. It's true.
Okay.
Austin, did your perspective change at all? Or
Still a soft 9.
soft 9? Soft 9.
Soft now.
Man,
It went from a hard 9 to solid 13.
Okay.
I didn't change for me, man. I think ultimately just in context, unfortunately, of like entertainment, right? I don't think this was meant to dissect. I mean, it's meant to dissect the shitty parts of society because society is shitty, but I don't think it was meant to like dissect anything. I don't know. Maybe we need to question ourselves. I think we need to question ourselves, right? But it didn't change for me in terms of storytelling, in terms of just genuine storytelling.
Movie-wise, great all around.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Great. Well, thank you guys for joining us on the WatchTower podcast. Keep tuning in. We're going to be doing this once a month. So keep coming to Aaron and George's Film Cafe. We'll be here once a month.
Great
I think you're
questions.
picked next. Who's picked next?
The pick will be announced soon.
The pick will be announced soon.
check
Keep
our
tuning into the
schedule.
podcast. We got some other great episodes coming out. Thank you for joining us. Keep watching cinema. Keep collecting home media, as I always say. And keep watching films. Let us know if you want us to review a film, suggest a film. Drop it down in the comments. Thank you guys for tuning in.
We'll think about it.
Good night, everybody.
Love you guys.